Hey there, welcome back to the channel. I'm Aja McClanahan with Principles of Increase, where I help you explore different ways to increase in every area of your life. I'm so excited that you're joining me today. Hopefully this will be a brief video just to give you an idea of what does it cost to live in Puerto Rico. So for those of you who may or may not know my story, I moved to the island a few months ago, but I had previously bought the property a few years back. And now I've been living there, so I can give you some feedback on what it's like to actually live there, not just vacation there, but actually live there. So I'm going to run down some of the areas that you're probably most interested in. So we'll start with housing. I will say that you actually can find reasonably priced properties in Puerto Rico. I have another video where I talked about how you can find cheaper properties in Puerto Rico. So there are so many different strategies that you can use to find inexpensive housing. But I would say in general, you can, let's talk about renting or leasing an apartment. It doesn't have to really be that expensive. Maybe a 2-bedroom, you could get something for maybe $400, $500, $600. A 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, maybe you're looking at $1,000. So there's ways to kind of play around with the numbers based on your location. But overall, to me, the rental prices are pretty inexpensive, and in some cases you can even get fairly close to the beach and still not pay as much. Of course, there's going to be a premium because you're close to the beach, but it doesn't always have to be like that. It'll overall, to me, be cheaper than some of the beach areas that you would find in the US. So let's talk about housing. Again, another video I talked about how you can actually find a cheap property. If you're willing to go a little bit away from the beach, maybe go a little bit up into the mountains in the campo, which is kind of like the country, you can get pretty inexpensive housing. You may be able to get a 3-bedroom, 1-bath for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, but we're talking about something that's going to be probably pretty far away from the city and major metropolitan areas, and you may have to trek through the mountains to get there. But that gives you an idea that, you know, it gives you an idea of how much your housing prices, you know, how much your housing could cost if you're willing to forego some of the amenities and luxuries. However, you can still get something 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, maybe a pool. And I'm just throwing out different numbers. These are some examples. You may find something that starts in the low 300s, and you can go obviously all the way up to $1 million. But I don't think it's far-fetched to think that you can get a property that has ample square footage, includes a pool in the $300,000 or $400,000 price range. Again, depending on, it's all location dependent. So for me, I would say compared to the US, housing in Puerto Rico is less expensive. Now, barring your super ultra high end luxury places, there are $5, $10 million, $20 million properties. They sit on a cliff, they overlook the ocean, you have all that going on. But in general, if you were to compare the housing prices, I would say Puerto Rico wins out on that. The other thing I want to talk about is the cost of food in Puerto Rico. So this has actually been a little bit of a struggle for me. I find that the food is actually about the same price in the US, and in some cases even more. What do I mean by that? For example, fresh fruits and vegetables, they're actually, for the most part, not grown on the island unless we're talking about like pineapples or oranges or something that's a little bit native to the tropics. And even in that case, a lot of stuff is still imported. So that makes the food prices high. And I believe there's some type of import tax as well that gets passed on to the consumer. So for me, Puerto Rico does not win out in food prices because things are just either, again, same as the US or slightly more expensive. You go to Walmart, you go to some of the major grocery chains, you're gonna spend more. Some cases, local meat like hamburger meat, chicken, maybe pork that is, raised on the island, that might be a little bit cheaper and it's actually fresher, and that I do appreciate. It's a little bit tastier, but it's pretty limited quantity. So when you go to a restaurant, however, I'll say that the prices are slightly lower than the US, but if you were to go somewhere else in Latin America, maybe Colombia or Panama, you're not getting those same prices. It's going to be much less expensive in those areas. So I would say Puerto Rico, when you go out to eat, maybe expect to pay 20 to 30% less, but it's not a huge difference like some people would lead you to believe, because I would consider Puerto Rico as part of Latin America, but it is part of US. So you have all that dynamic going on. So for me, food doesn't really win here. The other thing that I think is really important, especially if you're going to come here, live here, and move around, there are no super reliable public transportation options unless you're in the metropolitan area around San Juan. And even then, it would be better to have a car. The great news about being in the metropolitan area is that Ubers work there and you can find taxis. Where I live, not so much. So you really need a car to get around. Some of the municipalities have their own little trolley systems. However, I would say in most cases, it's best to get a car if you can. So what does it cost to fuel your car? Now, everything is quoted, all the prices are quoted in liters, so I don't know the exact gallon to liters pricing, but for me, it is also about the same or even slightly more expensive. And depending on the kind of car you have, a lot of people drive SUVs because the streets there are no bueno for the most part. The potholes, and then you're gonna drive around a lot. There are no major, I guess, what do they call them? Fairways, thoroughways, whatever the word is. Like the major ones are kind of, you have to drive to get to them. You don't have big 4-lane highways. So it just usually takes you longer to get places in Puerto Rico. So many times you might be driving up to hilly areas, mountains. That takes a toll on your gas consumption as well. So I believe that gas, to me, pretty expensive, and I've been spending quite a bit on gasoline. Now, we did recently get a smaller, more economical car for my oldest daughter, so it seems like the gas mileage on that is a lot better than my SUV, but it's still something to think about. You're going to pay money for your gasoline here in Puerto Rico. So the next thing I want to talk about is services. So you have somebody clean your house, cook you food, you have somebody come and do some construction work or repair. In that area, Puerto Rico definitely wins out. I have had some issues with my house and the prices that I have been quoted, maybe to put in windows, to work on plumbing. Those are a lot less expensive. I did more like construction work and renovation in Chicago, and those prices are insane. So in Puerto Rico, you are more likely to find the cost of labor for many things. And it's not just construction, that they're pretty reasonable. Now, when we talk about like beauty and grooming, I would say those are about the same as the States, maybe slightly less. And again, I am talking as, for all intents and purposes, I'm like a gringo here, basically, right? I know some Spanish, look like maybe I could be Spanish, but at the end of the day, I'm not, and they know that. So that factors into it as well. I'm sure there are people who live maybe in the campo and, you know, different areas, and they probably get much better deals on a lot of things than I do. So if you are a gringo like me watching this, you'll probably get the same treatment. So just wanted to add that in there. And the other thing I wanted to talk about are, I guess this would come under services. Let's talk about like education, caretaking, and things like that. So daycare, elder care, education would be like university, private Christian schools, private Montessori schools, things like that. To me, those prices are really much less than the US. In fact, that's one of the reasons I came to Puerto Rico. I was looking for some affordable elder care for my mom, and the prices in Illinois, Florida, and some of the other states were just insane. I happened to check into Puerto Rico, and it was very economical, and the level of service, I believe, would be more or less what you get in the United States. And my oldest daughter's in university now. That is something we're able to pay out of pocket, thankfully, because the prices are just very reasonable. My daughter's in a private Christian school here, and again, easily I pay, you know, maybe I would say in the States I pay 3 times what I'm paying now. So those are just some ideas I wanted to give you about what does it cost to live in Puerto Rico. Yes, there are Walmarts, there are Home Depots, there's Best Buy, there's some big box stores, and I would say that the prices are more or less the same, plus there might be that tax added to it. So I would say more or less, all in all, when you even everything out, you're looking at maybe just a slightly lower cost of living in the US based on your expenses and what you need to pay for here. Now, if you're gonna come here and rent, you don't have any kids, you don't have any elderly parents to take care of, Puerto Rico will probably be very inexpensive for you. But on the flip side, I will say that there are some advantages, namely, we get to be in a tropical environment. It's a little bit less stressful if you can tolerate some of the island time and inefficiencies. You're forced to kind of slow down, take care of your mental health. So I think some of those trade-offs work for me. Also, because I have so many things going on where I need a lot of education services, elder care, that was a huge part of my budget. So being able to cut that in half or even more, over 60 or 70%, that's a huge deal for our family, because ultimately we need to save where we can. So hopefully this video is helpful to give you an idea of what the cost of living is like in Puerto Rico. I don't have any firm facts and figures. These are just kind of like anecdotal prices and ranges that I've had based on my experience. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have recently moved to Puerto Rico, or you know someone who lives in Puerto Rico, or you have any feedback or input, I would love to hear that in the comments below. Also want to remind you to check out my book, Real Estate by Faith. And this book is especially for people who want to jump into the real estate game, but you feel like you're unprepared, you don't know what you're doing, you don't have money. So I encourage you to check out some of the links, some of the resources I have below. Thank you for watching this video, and I'm excited to see you for the next one.